All right, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Great. Did you know that over half of the world's population is currently experiencing severe water scarcity for at least part of the year? These numbers are only expected to increase, exacerbated by things like climate change and growing populations. Water is an indispensable resource to countless aspects of our daily lives, as well as ecosystems that likewise depend on adequate levels of this vital resource. Decreasing levels of water is resulting in serious consequences. Washington is hardly immune to this critical issue, as this past summer, a drought emergency was declared in 12 watersheds in parts of 12 counties, with the rest of the state in a drought advisory, which included the city of Chehalis. Water conservation is going to become more and more important as time goes on and as the impacts of climate change continue to increase. This begs the question of how can water conservation strategy implementation be used to reduce water use within small cities in Washington? To address this question, I interned with the Chehalis Basin Partnership, which is an organization that focuses on the protection of natural resources located in the Chehalis watershed, which, as you can see here on this map, is located in Southwest Washington. Through this organization, I work specifically with the city of Chehalis. Through my internship, I researched the topic of municipal water conservation to understand how the city of Chehalis could reduce its water use, especially in response to peak demand and peak water scarcity during hot summer months. This research included 4 main methods, which included public outreach, which was conducted at city festivals, citizen surveys of Chehalis residents, expert interviews from municipalities near Chehalis with conservation programs, and finally, a literature review of key strategies. From my research, I found that there's 4 main important strategies for small cities in Washington to address this problem. These things include the development of water conservation plans, policy measures, municipal infrastructure improvements, and finally, public outreach and education. So what are these things? Water conservation plans are the basis for which cities can assess water availability and in turn, create actions to meet their conservation goals. Through my research, I found that many larger, more urban cities often have very well-developed conservation programs, while smaller, more rural cities, like Chehalis, were found to lack these things. This is due to socio-political factors. To address this, water conservation plans through these programs must be suited to create plans suited to the needs of specific cities in relation to their demographics and political views. In addition to this, policy measures such as tiered water pricing are also important. Tiered water pricing is a form of water policy that includes a set of different tiers with increasing per unit costs, charging efficient water users lower rates and excessive water users higher rates. One expert interviewee stated that this is the most important solution to water conservation. Infrastructure improvements such as metering and leak detection were also found to be important. These things were also significant, and one interviewee stated that it's important for us to conserve now while it's still accessible in order to save for the future. In addition to this, public outreach and education were also important. Informed and supportive citizens willing to engage with conservation efforts are essential. People must be educated on the issues at hand in order to care and be willing to support solutions, such as the previously mentioned solutions. As visible in this graph, citizens were widely supportive of many different strategies, as you can see in the blue and green sections. Citizen surveys were especially important to this research, as understanding the views of citizens is crucial to developing strategies that not only include their voices, but also allow for their support. To begin addressing water conservation, it must be determined who is responsible to act, whether at the citizen or government level. As visible in these collaborative strategies, I found that it's both. Both citizens and governments can and should work together to collaborate on water conservation. Citizens often don't want to be the only ones putting in effort, and governments can be hesitant to act if they don't have a lot of public support for policies. So, both of these parties must collaborate to combat water scarcity. While water conservation is becoming more and more prevalent, we do have some solutions. Citizens alone should not be held responsible to combat water scarcity, especially as individual actions such as reducing residential water use alone do not correlate to expansive water savings. So, we as citizens should not only reduce our own individual water use, but also collaborate and engage in things like voting, community involvement, and pressing our governments to prioritize this issue. This research about Chehalis has implications that extend to water conservation at broader levels and even other environmental issues. It's important for citizens to collaborate and for governments to include all voices to lead meaningful change and preserve our water resources for the future. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I'd like to give a special thanks to my site supervisor, Kirsten Harma, my faculty advisor, Professor Christy Strauss, and my Capstone cohort, friends, and family who supported me throughout this process. Thank you so much. All right, and I have some time for questions. Yeah. Yeah, so tiered water pricing was something I found in my research to be really important. One huge barrier to water conservation is the cost element. So cities or water utilities associated with cities often make money off of selling water. So think your water bill. So when you're paying for your water, the city is gaining revenue. But when we conserve water, that's actually decreasing in cities. So this can be a barrier to cities actually wanting to pursue water conservation if they're going to be decreasing in city revenue. But tiered water pricing is actually a solution, an equitable one too. It allows for an increased cost that's distributed equitably. So people who have maybe lower income people and things like that are charged lower rates, while people or corporations with a lot of money who are using a lot of resources and water are charged at higher rates. So the city's still able to make the same amount of money, but it's really a more equitable way of doing that. Thank you. Can you take another question? Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, the question was, if anyone didn't hear, if I looked into the industry element of water conservation and how maybe in Chehalis, how corporations are impacting that. So I did, for part of my internship, I attended the Chehalis Basin Partnership's monthly meetings. And one thing among the experts that attended those meetings that was really prevalent was the impact of water drawn from the city and how big corporations are actually a huge cause of this. So one thing is Chehalis gets its water from the Newaukum River. And a big element in Chehalis is who is drawing water out and how they are charged. So tiered water pricing is also encompassing of that element of kind of corporate responsibility in water pricing. So tiered water pricing would also impact those corporations who are maybe using a lot more water than the everyday person. So that element is also important to kind of make sure the cost is being pursued by the producer rather than the citizens and the consumer. But yeah, great question. Thank you.